This man is John Nash, one of the most brilliant minds of his generation. He saw the world like no one else. He achieved many prestigious achievements in math. One time, he was taking math classes at Princeton University. During a break, he met his arch rival named Hanson. After a bit of an argument, he left for his dorm room and met his roommate named Charles, a literature student. It didn't take long for them to become friends. For the umpteenth time, Hanson embarrassed John, saying that he would never get the chance to do an apprenticeship in the Wheeler Lab, a research and development center funded by the United States Department of Defense. It was because until now, John has not been able to make a paper as a determination of his work placement.
The hubris of the defeated. John Nash.
Hearing that, he couldn't stop thinking about the original idea for his paper. After staying in the library for 2 days in a row, his friend Charles finally came and invited John for a short break at the bar with him. The next day, John went to see the professor to ask for extra time to finish his paper, but when the professor heard the idea of his paper which discussed the dynamics of government, the professor immediately said that John would never succeed in that crazy idea.
Come on, let's go out. John, it's enough. Come on! What is your problem? It's that problem.
One day when he was working on his paper in a cafe, he accidentally saw a blonde woman who became the inspiration for the problem of his paper. By using a complex calculation formula, John finally managed to finish his paper, and after the professor saw the results of his paper, he was surprised by the breakthroughs in John's paper. How happy John was when the professor allowed him to do an apprenticeship in the Wheeler Lab. Proceeds to 5 years later, John was invited to the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense to decode the telecommunications encryption used by the Nazis. It didn't take long for him to crack the codes, which surprised them with his genius.
4803 should be routing orders across the board.
Gentlemen, your country a great service, son.
Somewhere else, secretly, an agent had noticed John's brilliant performance. After returning from the Pentagon, he immediately went to Wheeler Lab to give the assignment to solve a case of multivariable calculus that he made. Just before when he was about to leave, suddenly an agent of the Department of Defense who had been secretly watching him yesterday approached him. This agent's name is Parcher. He contracted John to find and crack the encryption code for every upcoming problem in the future to help his country. John was happy to accept the offer. The next day, while he was busy looking for codes in magazines, suddenly one of the students named Alicia came to talk about her calculus assignment which John gave to her the other day. Unexpectedly, after that meeting, both of them fell in love with each and finally got married. After the marriage, John was still doing his job to find hidden codes in the magazines and then sent the cracked file through the nearest mailbox. The next day when he was looking for the encryption code in the park, he accidentally met his old friend Charles who was walking with his nephew there. John told him about his secret mission as well as his love story with his wife. So far, their marital relationship looked very harmonious. In fact, they often had time for a romantic dinner. One day when he sent an encryption code, they got ambushed by gunshots.
Following us. Get out!
Knowing that someone has been following him, John started to feel afraid and showed strange behavior when teaching his students. John's fear was getting bigger day by day, but on the other hand, he couldn't tell his secret mission to his wife. Like it or not, his wife was forced to report John to the mental hospital to get therapy for his weird behavior until finally when he was teaching.
Trade by the numbers.
Professor, I'd like you to come with me.
Several people looked and tried to capture him and brought him to the psychiatrist. After he came back to his consciousness, he got more convinced that the psychiatrist was a Soviet kidnapper who wanted the encryption code that he managed to crack. When he got cornered, suddenly John saw Charles, but he just kept quiet. John was angry and thought that Charles had betrayed him. Seeing his behavior, the psychiatrist immediately realized that John had suffered from schizophrenia. All this time, the secret agent and Charles were just an image that he created himself. Upon hearing the explanation from the psychiatrist, Alicia realized that she never really knew his husband. To confirm her husband's illness, she visited the office as well as the mailbox that John usually used to send the encrypted code, and it turned out that all the documents he sent were stored there and had never been sent. When Alicia tried to convince her husband that his work and friends were just imagination, John was angry until finally, his schizophrenic symptoms recurred. Long story short, John finally managed to fight his illness and even had a baby. Unfortunately, when John stopped taking his medicine, suddenly his imagination came back.
Sir, you're not real.
In his imagination, Parcher managed to convince John that they are not delusions and that the secret missions and all the encryption codes were real. Finally, John fell back into his imagination. One day when Alicia was doing laundry in the backyard, she accidentally saw the open gate to the back.
Charles was watching. It was mixed into my bloodstream.
After that, she immediately ran and called the mental hospital, but suddenly her John came and his delusions scared her.
You'll go back to the hospital.
John, answer me!
Countless people.
When John was busy arguing with the imaginary secret agent, Alicia left the house to save herself, but when John saw Charles, he finally realized that all that happened were nothing but his delusions. He immediately ran outside and stopped Alicia's car. When Alicia heard that, she immediately called back the psychiatrist who used to take care of her husband. The psychiatrist suggested they treated John back with his therapy in the mental hospital, but John didn't agree with the suggestion and wanted to cure his illness using his way. What he needed was nothing but time to heal. Unfortunately, Alicia, who loved her husband, stayed beside him and accompanied him through all until John was able to fight back his illness. A few years later, John decided to return to his campus to meet his old rival, who became a professor at Princeton University at that time. Lucky for John, after hearing his stories, Hansen was willing to help him to fight his delusions. Days and months passed, and John finally got used to not responding to people in his imagination. Even when there are new people that came to him, he always makes sure whether the new person is real or just an imaginary person. Long story short, John's condition was getting better. Thanks to his persistence and genius, he was allowed to teach students at Princeton. Finally, he got his professor title back. After all the ups and downs fighting back his illness, all his colleagues and even other professors have recognized his reputation. He even won the Nobel Prize.
We're here tonight because of you. You are the reason